Black Panther. So we've been locked down for a while. I took an opportunity to rewatch it in all of its majesty. It's still spectacular. It's only my second time watching it. Believe it or not, I'm one of those people that can watch a movie one time and catch it all. And sometimes that's a little overpowering, but I enjoy it. Um, all of the imagery, the iconography, the historical throwbacks, and the allusions to what could have been hit me squarely again the second time. I think that was probably true for the majority of viewers in my age range, the 40-ish, who grew up without seeing significant mainstream black super anti-heroes or non-traditional heroes, but this was the literal king of Wakanda, the wealthiest nation on the continent of Africa. I mean, it was the Black Panther. Now, the Marvel universe has always been apt to challenge convictions, whether it's the strong structured parallels of X-Men and the Civil Rights Movement, or the othering of immigrants today, or the storyline of Captain America as a sleeper Hydra agent. I absolutely love that one. They'll often really challenge the conviction. But whether it was the original Jack Kirby to the Ta-Nehisi Coates version, they took a gamble in keeping the storyline fairly independent for Black Panther. And I can honestly say I appreciate that. That's different when contrasting most of the black superheroes who were mostly seen as sidekicks. I reveled anytime the better pilot and better friend and probably the more morally significant or um, morally upstanding James Rhodes took on the mantle of Iron Man when Tony was unavailable for whatever reason. And not just as War Machine. He really was Iron Man when Iron Man couldn't be Iron Man. Tony Stark couldn't do it. But again, it was more as a secondary person as opposed to Black Panther, who stood very much on its own storyline since its inception, which it did struggle, right? So when the movie came out, it gave a lot of us an opportunity to celebrate that kind of independence. It was kind of rewarding to see so many people flock to the theaters to see a very unapologetically black, strong-willed king of Wakanda who dominated the box office. You have to take into account that for years, black geeks, writers, and celebrities were told that a black lead superhero would not sell, could not be made because it would never recoup its its investment. They were told that black audiences would not show up or didn't have the money. White audiences would reject the idea of it being completely foreign, which I kind of get. I'd even argue that it might have taken seeing a black president, which many of us thought at one point was impossible, to get a movie like Black Panther. And yet, on its opening weekend, it grossed 25 million, 50 million on its opening day, and then wound up being, I think, at $700 million, highest grossing film of 2018. So it was great to see that disproven. Now, we had many stories in the movie that resonated with African Americans in particular, the story of Chala, but also the story of Killmonger, the forgotten son. He was villainous, but the movie really was very nuanced. The Killmonger character was also very nuanced. The discussion of the African continent forgetting its forgotten sons, its people in America, that wasn't lost. Right, that hit me personally. Similar convictions or conversations have occurred over the years when trying to resolve the reality that some empires were complicit in the African slave trade. Again, a complex nuanced issue, but the pain that resonated was very real. The connection between father and son, which plays heavily in the dialogue of African Americans, this too was also very present. So, whether addressing the myth of the absent black father or generating conversation of how certain structural dynamics in American society interfere with black families, that was all also very present in the movie. There was something for everyone. Same with the representations of strong yet vulnerable black women, which we tend to see very different stereotypes, you know, from the videos and uh, black exploitation to white movies where they're nannies or the mammy, etc. We saw a lot of very different archetypes when it came to black and African women. Um, and the reality is, black women have been reduced on historically, big and small screen. Maybe we had a few standouts with Foxy Brown, almost anything Cicely Tyson or Viola Davis did. Maybe not The Help, but there are several that are worth noting. But here you had a spectrum of power and vulnerability. And the smartest person in the room was the independently minded, funny, loyal, and powerful Tiny Shuri. Right? You had it all. It gave many of us a sense of being seen, even if for a moment, for a summer. We don't always get education from where we came. Black history in America often starts with Black Americans or Africans landing here and in chains, and then we get a little bit of the ancillary contributions, some of them major, but contextualized as very minor in our history books, and then we get a month where we somewhat celebrate it. But rarely do we really address the impact of the Kush Empire, Carthage, Mali, or the leaders and warriors, the women of the Doi Empire, the tribes of the Nile, how the name Shaka resonated with invaders, or Mansa Musa, or Musa the First of Mali, once the wealthiest man in modern history. We got a little bit of all of that, or hints of those in this movie. The movie was a culmination of stories, a snowball picking up fragments from an often ignored storyline, landing squarely in the lap of a modern fantasy for us to digest. And we knew what it meant to see the story on the big screen. Certainly I did, just as we knew what it meant for little ones to see it as well. The impact on the psychology of seeing a story, a role model, and we can minimize how trivial that can be when you're used to seeing it. But this again was different. There were even rumors of ceasefires in some neighborhoods to ensure kids felt safe enough or were safe enough to attend the viewings of the movie. That's kind of, it was a passing tangential moment and power that the movie had in 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 society, but it was really interesting to see that dynamic play out. And despite the detractors, the movie wasn't just ahead of its time. It was a statement on being here, present, and seen. If you haven't seen it yet and you have time and access, give it a watch. While trying to see it, try and see it through a different lens. Try and see it through the lens of someone who's never seen themselves on that screen in that way ever before.